Eli had been in space for so long that he could not remember the last time he had walked on a surface that did not tremble faintly under the hum of an engine. The station called Arkway Outpost floated like a steel ring in the black, a halfway stop for freighters, traders, and wanderers who dared to travel between the mapped routes and the unknown sectors. His ship, a patched cargo hauler that had been his only home for the past 3 years, creaked as it docked. He was tired, hungry, and curious to see faces that were not lit only by the glow of a console. The air inside the station felt warmer than his ship, thick with the smells of alien spices and mechanical oil. Every direction he turned there were voices in languages he did not know, and eyes that glanced quickly before returning to their business. Markets lined the central concourse, stalls piled with strange fruits that glistened as if dusted with frost, tools shaped for hands that were not human, fabrics that shimmered with shifting colors under the light panels above. It was the kind of place where you could get anything, from food and fuel to information that someone might kill for. He had just stopped by a stall selling coils of fine conductive wire when he noticed her. She was seated at the far end of the row, alone at a small table near the wall. A deep hood shadowed her face completely. Her robe was a dark color, loose but not shabby, the kind travelers wore when they wanted to pass unnoticed. But she was not doing anything, not eating, not reading a datapad, not speaking to anyone. Her posture was still, her hands folded on the table, and yet he had the strange feeling that she was watching him, even though he could not see her eyes. Something about her presence pulled at his attention, though he told himself it was only because she looked out of place. The market was a noisy rush of movement, and she sat apart from it like a fixed point in the middle of a current. He tried to look away, but when he glanced back she had not moved. Eli was about to turn down another row when trouble started, near the spice merchant's stall. A burly trader with metallic implants running along his jaw was arguing with the merchant over prices. The words were loud, the gestures sharper, and before long the trader shoved the merchant back. A few bystanders stepped away, not wanting to be caught in it. Eli moved forward instinctively. He had seen arguments turn bad quickly in places like this, but before he could reach them the hooded woman was already there. She moved fast, gliding rather than running, her robe swirling around her ankles. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and clear, cutting through the tension like a line of light in a dark room. She said something short to the trader, and though Eli did not understand the words, the tone carried a kind of steady authority that made the man hesitate. She raised her hand not threateningly, but as if to halt him in place, and after a long breath, the trader turned, muttered something, and left. The merchant let out a slow sigh of relief. Eli found himself standing a few steps away, watching the scene end before it could turn ugly. The hooded woman looked at the merchant for a moment, said something else quietly, then turned to leave. As she passed him, Eli caught the faintest scent of something metallic and sweet, like air after a storm. "Thanks," he said without thinking. She paused, tilting her head slightly toward him, but the hood still hid her face completely. Her voice, when she replied, was softer now, almost like a note played on a distant instrument. It was nothing. Then she walked away, disappearing into the flow of people, as if she had never been there at all. The rest of the day, Eli kept catching glimpses of her in the crowd. Once, he saw her in the upper balcony, leaning against the rail as ships came and went. Another time, she was standing near a stall that sold old navigation maps, not looking at the goods but at the people passing by. She never stayed in one place for long, and he began to wonder if she was watching him or if he was simply noticing her because of that first strange meeting. When evening came, the artificial lights shifted to a dimmer hue, mimicking a sunset that the station had never known. Eli found himself in a small food court, eating a hot stew that smelled faintly of pepper and citrus. Across the open space, The hooded woman sat again, her hands resting on the table, her posture unchanged from before. She was facing his direction, though it was impossible to say if her eyes were on him or elsewhere. A group of miners came through, laughing loudly, one of them stumbling close to her table. Without moving her head, she shifted her chair just enough to avoid the man's swinging arm. The motion was quick, precise, almost too smooth to be casual. Eli ate slowly, his thoughts circling the same question. Who was she? Why was she here alone? Why did she keep appearing wherever he went? There were plenty of travelers in Arkway Outpost who wanted to avoid notice, but most of them kept to the shadows or stayed in their ships. She, on the other hand, sat in plain view as if waiting for something or someone. When he left the food court, he took a different route back toward his ship, winding through a quieter maintenance corridor. The sound of the market faded, replaced by the hum of power conduits and the occasional hiss of an air vent. Halfway through, he saw her again, standing at the far end of the corridor. She was speaking in a low voice, but no one else was there. Eli slowed his steps, straining to hear. The words were in a language he had never heard before, flowing and layered, with a rhythm that almost sounded like two voices speaking at once. Then she lifted her hand slightly, and a shimmer appeared in the air before her, a faint ripple, like heat over metal. It vanished an instant later. She turned her head, and for a moment, the light caught the edge of her hood. He saw a glimpse of her skin near the neck pale, but traced with faint glowing lines that pulsed slowly, like veins carrying light instead of blood. The sight froze him where he stood. No species he knew had markings like that. Before he could decide whether to step forward or retreat, she lowered her hand, pulled the hood tighter, and walked away without looking back. Eli stayed where he was for a long moment, the hum of the station around him, his thoughts suddenly sharper. Whatever she was no ordinary traveler. Eli did not sleep well that night. The small bunk on his ship felt colder than usual, and his thoughts kept circling back to the hooded woman. The faint glow on her skin stayed in his mind as if burned there, a light that had no right to exist on something that looked so close to human. He told himself to forget it, that plenty of species had markings or bioluminescent traits, but deep down he knew it was different. Something in her presence felt layered, like she carried more than one story inside her. The next morning the market was as alive as ever, voices overlapping, the air thick with scents from a dozen worlds. Eli tried to focus on the parts he came for: fuel couplings, dried rations, and a few mechanical parts he could not fabricate on his own, but his eyes kept scanning for her without him even meaning to. He spotted her sooner than he expected. She was near the central square where cargo loaders moved crates, the size of small rooms. The workers shouted to each other over the noise of machinery, and no one paid much attention to her. A sudden shout cut through the air. One of the loaders, carrying a child on his shoulders, had stopped to talk with a friend. The child, curious and restless, leaned over the side of the rail that separated the walkway from the long drop to the maintenance levels below. In the chaos of workers moving past, no one seemed to notice that the child's balance was tipping too far. Eli saw it and began to run, but he was too far. The hooded woman moved first. She crossed the distance between her and the child in less than a breath, her steps impossibly fast for the space available. She reached out, catching the back of the child's clothing just as he started to fall. She pulled him back with one smooth motion, steadying him without a hint of strain. The loader turned in alarm, grabbing his son and thanking her in a rush of words. She nodded only once before stepping back into the crowd, her hands hidden once more inside her sleeves. Eli stood there, watching her vanish into the current of people. The way she moved it was more than speed. It was as if she had seen it happen before it happened, her reaction perfectly timed. Later, when he returned to the docking bay to drop off the parts he had bought, he saw her again. This time she was alone, standing near one of the large viewports that looked out into open space. Beyond the glass, the station's exterior lights cast a pale glow on the black, and ships moved in slow arcs toward their berths. She seemed not to notice anyone passing behind her, her focus locked on something far away. Eli approached quietly, unsure if he should speak. Before he could, she lifted her hand slightly, fingers brushing the glass, and her other hand moved across her sleeve as if tracing invisible symbols. A soft pulse of light flickered through the viewport frame, so faint most would not have noticed it. Then she lowered her hands and stepped away. "Do you do that often?" Eli asked, finally finding his voice. She paused, not turning fully toward him. "Do what?" "Talk to glass," he said, trying to sound casual, though his heart was beating faster. There was the faintest sound of amusement in her voice when she replied, "The glass listens better than most." Then she walked past him, leaving him with no clear answer and more questions than before. That night, Eli decided he needed to know more. He wandered the quieter levels of the outpost where the market noise faded and the lighting was softer, the air carrying the smell of old metal and coolant. It was there, in a shadowed corner of a storage dock, that he found her again. She was not alone this time. At first, he thought she was speaking to another person hidden in the shadows, but when he stepped closer, he realized there was no one there. She spoke in that same flowing language he had heard before, the sound layered as if two voices were speaking in perfect unison. A faint shimmer appeared again in the air, before her, larger this time, almost the shape of a doorway, but it flickered and faded after only a few seconds. She seemed frustrated, her hands tightening briefly at her sides. Then she sensed him and turned. He froze, but her reaction was not anger. She studied him for a long moment, the hood hiding her face entirely. "You follow me," she said simply. Eli swallowed. "You're not exactly hard to notice." "Perhaps I want to be noticed," she replied, her voice softer now. "Or perhaps I want to see who will keep looking." Her words lingered in the air as she stepped past him and left the storage dock. Eli stood there, staring at the empty space where the shimmering doorway had been, and knew that whatever she was hiding was not small. She carried something with her: knowledge, danger, maybe both. He told himself that if he saw her again, he would demand the truth. But even as he thought it, he was not sure if he wanted answers, or if he simply wanted to keep chasing the mystery. The third day on Arkway Outpost began like the others, with the market alive and restless, but the air felt different. Ele could not explain it at first, only that people were moving with a sharper urgency, and the station's usual low hum seemed thinner, as if waiting for something. Traders spoke in quick bursts. Stall owners packed away their most valuable goods, and the air carried the faint tang of overheated wiring that came when the station shifted to alert readiness. When he asked a dockhand what was happening, the man only shook his head and muttered about an incoming signal. A moment later, the station's public speakers came alive with a message that cut through every conversation. The voice was cold, precise, and mechanical in tone. It gave coordinates, Arkway's coordinates, and stated a demand in galactic common. The words were simple: surrender the one you shelter, or face destruction. The message repeated twice before ending, and a deep silence followed. Then the market burst into movement again, but now it was fear driving it. Security officers began setting up checkpoints, scanning every passerby. The few people who still lingered in the open spoke in hushed tones about the ship that had sent the threat. Some said it was a warship. Others swore it belonged to a faction from beyond mapped space. Eli's first thought was not about the station or the threat, it was of the hooded woman. The memory of her voice saying, "Perhaps I want to be noticed," rose in his mind like a warning. He began searching for her without caring if it made him obvious. He found her near the upper decks, walking with that same unhurried grace as before, as though the announcement had been for someone else entirely. She stopped when she saw him. Her head tilted slightly, and for a moment, they stood in the dimly lit corridor with the sound of alarms faint in the distance. "They have come," she said, her voice quiet but certain. "Who has come?" Eli asked, though part of him already knew the answer. She did not move for several breaths, then stepped closer. "Those who have hunted me for years. They will not leave without me." Eli glanced down the corridor, aware of the armed security teams gathering people for scans. "If that's true, we need to hide you." "It is too late for hiding," she said, and her tone was not fear but acceptance. "You deserve to know the truth." Before he could ask what she meant, she reached up and took hold of the edge of her hood. The fabric slid back slowly, and light from the corridor panels touched her face for the first time. She looked human, strikingly so, but her eyes held a glow like molten gold, and across her skin ran those same luminous lines he had glimpsed before. They shifted gently, almost alive, forming patterns that seemed both natural and deliberate. Her hair was dark, but it shimmered faintly at the edges as though each strand held a thread of light. She met his gaze directly, and in that instant, Eli felt as though she could see through every thought he had ever hidden. "My people were human once," she said, and her voice carried a weight that made him listen without a breath. "Centuries ago, an exploration fleet from your world vanished into deep space. They were not destroyed, they were changed. The place we found was not empty. It touched us, remade us. We are no longer only human, but neither are we alien in the way you think." Eli stared at her, the words fighting with what his eyes told. "Him, and the ship out there? They are a faction born from the same meeting," she said. "But where my kind sought to live quietly, they sought to rule. They see us as dangerous if we remain free. They have erased almost all of my people." Her voice did not shake, but he saw the faint tightening of her hands, the only sign of pain she allowed to show. "Why come here?" he asked. "I am searching for what remains," she said. "Some of us scattered across the galaxy. There are signs, traces, messages left in places between worlds. But every time I find one, they find me." Eli felt the deck under his feet vibrate slightly, the signal of the station adjusting orbit or preparing defensive measures. In the distance, faint through the hull, came the rumble of larger engines, the approaching warship. "You should let me help you," he said. Her gaze stayed steady. "Help me, and they will see you as part of this. They will not stop." "I've already seen too much to walk away," Eli replied. Something in her expression softened, though the glow in her eyes did not fade. She stepped past him, moving toward the lift that led to the command decks. "Then stay close," she said. "The station will need more than its own defenses to survive what's coming." Eli followed without hesitation. Whatever happened next, he knew the course of his time on Arkway Outpost had changed. And as the lift doors closed, the thought burned in his mind. She had been hiding in plain sight, not from fear, but because the truth of her was larger than most would believe. Command deck of Arkway Outpost was a place few civilians ever saw, a wide room wrapped in tall viewports that showed the endless dark beyond. Now those viewports framed a shape that grew larger by the minute, a warship with jagged lines and a black hull that drank in the light around it. Its presence was not loud, not yet, but it carried the kind of silence that felt heavier than any sound. Crew members moved quickly between stations, calling out shield reports, weapon readiness, and incoming transmission updates. The air had the tense sharpness of a place holding its breath before the first shot. Eli stayed near the woman as they entered, noticing how the officers at the consoles looked up when she passed. It was not recognition, but something closer to instinct. They could sense she did not belong here, yet none stepped in front of her. She moved to the central display where a glowing map showed the warship's trajectory and the station's defensive grid. "They will not negotiate," she said, her voice carrying across the room without needing to be raised. "They came for me, and if you give me to them they will destroy you anyway, to erase all who saw me." The station commander, a tall man with pale eyes, turned to her with the weariness of someone who had already guessed this truth, but wanted it denied. "If that is true, then what choice do we have?" "Fight," she said simply. The word hung in the air like a fragile thread. Eli stepped forward before the hesitation could settle into defeat. "She's right. If they take her, it won't end here. And you've got defenses you're not even using, because you think they're too old to be worth it. I can help get them working again." The commander looked at him sharply. "And what makes you think you can do that?" "I've kept a half-broken hauler running across 5 sectors with nothing but salvage and stubbornness," Eli said. "Give me access to your turret controls and maintenance crews, and we can make those systems fight harder than they have in years." A murmur moved through the crew. The commander hesitated, then gave a short nod. It happened quickly after that. Eli was taken down to the maintenance bays where a group of mechanics were already scrambling over the old defense turrets, patching wiring and swapping out cracked coolant lines. The hooded woman, though now her face was uncovered, followed him, moving with quiet certainty through the chaos. When one of the engineers barked that a targeting array was fried beyond use, she stepped forward and placed her hands on the console. The screens lit up with a soft pulse of gold. Lines of alien script appeared alongside the human interface, moving faster than the eye could follow. The array's damaged circuits hummed back to life as though nothing had ever been wrong. She stepped back, the glow in her eyes dimming slightly. "I can merge with your systems," she told Eli in a low voice as they moved to the next turret. "I learned how long ago, on ships my people once crewed. It is not easy, but it is faster than any human operator." For the next hour they worked side by side, Eli running power from auxiliary generators while she linked her mind to the station's weapons. Crew members moved in coordinated bursts, their earlier fear replaced by the steady rhythm of preparation. Outside, the warship drew closer until its hull filled the viewports entirely. When the first shot came, it was like a crack through the bones of the station. Shields flared pale blue, absorbing most of the impact but letting enough through to rattle every corridor. The second shot was met with a reply, a volley from the turrets Eli and the woman had restored. Streams of light cut across the dark, striking the enemy ship's flank and forcing it to adjust position. On the command deck, the tactical map shifted as both sides tested each other's defenses. The woman stood at the central console, her hands resting lightly on the surface, her eyes bright as she directed the flow of fire through the system she now controlled. Eli relayed damage reports, called for coolant, overheated turrets, and kept the crew focused. Then the enemy fired a concentrated blast aimed directly at the section where Eli was working. There was no time to move. He saw the flare of light through the viewport and braced himself for the impact, but it never came. A field of shimmering gold had formed around him, bending the energy away so it struck harmlessly against the far wall. The woman was there, standing between him and the viewport, her body rigid with the effort of holding the shield. For a moment the glow was so bright it drowned out her features, and then it faded as the threat passed. "You saved me," Eli said, the words feeling too small for what had just happened. "You saved me first," she replied without looking at him. Already turning back to the controls, the battle raged on for what felt like hours, though the station's time logs would later say it lasted less than 20 minutes. Finally, a series of coordinated strikes from the repaired turrets tore through the enemy's starboard engines. Fire bloomed briefly in the void before being swallowed by the dark. The warship began to retreat, its weapons silent, leaving only the echo of its threat in the cum channels. The command deck erupted in a mixture of relief and disbelief. The station was still standing. Ailey looked at the woman, who now seemed more tired than he had ever seen her, though her posture was still straight. She met his gaze for a moment, and in her eyes he thought he saw gratitude and something quieter respect. The warship was gone, swallowed by the black beyond Arkway's sensors, but its absence did not erase the feeling it had left behind. The station still hummed with tension, crew members moving quickly to assess damage and restore power to the sections that had gone dark during the fight. Smoke drifted faintly from a cracked conduit above the maintenance deck, and the air carried the metallic tang of overheated machinery. Yet beneath the fatigue and the debris, there was a current of relief running through every corridor. Arkway had survived, and that alone felt like something worth holding on to. Eli leaned against the railing outside the central hangar, looking out at the rows of ships rusting in their berths. His arms ached from hours of repairs and rewiring. His throat felt raw from shouting over battle noise, and his mind was heavy with all that had happened. But it was not exhaustion that kept him still, it was the knowledge that his time here, and with her, was almost over. He heard her footsteps. Before he saw her, they were quiet, almost without weight, yet somehow distinct from the shuffle of mechanics and dockhands. She approached without the hood this time, her face open to the station lights. The golden glow in her eyes was dimmer now, the luminous lines along her skin slower in their shifting patterns. She looked at him as she stopped a few steps away, and for a long moment neither spoke. "They will return," she said at last, her voice calm but carrying the weight of certainty. "They never give up the hunt. This was only a delay." Eli nodded slowly. "Then you have to keep moving." "I do," she said, and there was no hesitation in her tone, but something in her gaze held a quiet reluctance. "Every place I stop, I leave a mark that draws them. It is safer for me to travel alone." "You're not alone," he said, and he was surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "Not anymore. You've got people who know you exist now, people who won't. Just stand aside." She looked away briefly, as though weighing the truth in his words. "Perhaps. But I cannot stay here. If I do, I will bring them back to the station, and next time they may not fail." Eli wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. The warship had left a warning on open channels before vanishing, a simple message that carried as much promise. "As threat, we will find you." No one on Arkway doubted they meant it. "What will you do now?" he asked. She glanced toward the viewport where the stars lay scattered like distant fires. "There are others out there, my people, hidden and scattered. I will find them if I can. We are fewer every year, but together we may still stand against what hunts us. Alone, we are only prey." A silence passed between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with the knowledge that their paths were about to split. Around them the hangar was alive with movement engineers shouting for tools, pilots running final checks, drones gliding overhead with replacement panels, but it all felt far away. Finally she reached into the folds of her robe and took out a small metal disc, no larger than Eli's palm. It was etched with markings like the ones that moved across her skin, the lines forming patterns that seemed to shift even when held still. She pressed it into his hand. "If you ever find yourself in a place where the stars seem wrong and the air feels heavy," she said, "press the center and speak my name. I will hear it." Eli looked down at the disc, then back at her. "I don't even know your name." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "You do not need to yet. When you speak it, you will understand." She stepped back then, the distance between them growing though neither moved quickly. At the far side of the hangar, a small ship waited sleek, silver-edged, and unlike any model Eli had ever seen. Its surface shimmered faintly, the way her skin did when light touched it. As she approached, the ship's hatch opened without a sound. Eli followed a few steps, stopping just short of the ramp. "You know," he said, "part of me wishes I'd never seen you in that market. Would have been easier that way." "And the other part?" she asked. "The other part knows I'd never trade it," he said. For a heartbeat, she only looked at him, and then she inclined her head in a gesture that felt older than any greeting he knew. "Then we are both grateful for the meeting," she said. She stepped into the ship, the hatch closing behind her in a slow, seamless motion. Eli stayed where he was as the craft lifted, its engines making only the faintest hum. It rose toward the hangar's force field barrier, passed through without a ripple, and was gone, vanishing into the dark between the stars with a speed that made the heart race. He stood there long after the ship had disappeared, the disk still in his hand, its surface warm as though it remembered her touch. Somewhere out there, beyond the mapped routes and the safe lanes, she was moving again, carrying her strange light into places where it was hunted. The station around him was returning to its routines. The markets would reopen, ships would dock and depart, and Arkway would hum again with the life of a place that had seen danger and lived. But for Eli, the outpost no longer felt like just another stop on a long journey. It felt like the place where the galaxy had shown him that humanity's story was bigger than anyone believed, that it stretched far past Earth and its colonies, into the hands of those who had been lost and changed, yet still carried the spark of what they once were. As he turned to leave the hangar, the disk caught the light, the shifting lines glinting for just a second like the promise of a star he might one day follow. The end.